From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, consider this with Kathy Wyatt, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
With artificial intelligence blasting its way into our society, it's hard not to be excited, especially if you're a college student. I mean, the researching process just became a fraction of the time and effort it used to require, because now we have programs like ChatGPT that are essentially language processing tools. But more so than that is they will find information we're searching for, and it's going to deliver it back to you in a conversational medium. So what does this mean for research? Well, the possibilities are endless, and quite frankly, it minimizes your effort in the researching process. So you could use it to brainstorm, say, a research topic. How about a few research questions? You can use it to find articles. Literally tell it to list you 5 different journal articles based on that research topic. You can have it then synthesize all of that information, or perhaps just summarize one of the articles. Honestly, it can probably explain any concept or topic better than your professors can due to the extremely large amount of capabilities artificial intelligence has. But
hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 28th season and this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, cognitive atrophy and AI usage. Joining us to talk more about it are UNO's Martha Garcia Murillo, Dean of the College of Information, Science and Technology, and Ronnie Ryder-Paulman, Distinguished Professor of Industrial and Organizational Psychology. Thank you both so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you, Kathy.
You bet. Martha, I want to start with you. What is the formal definition of artificial intelligence?
Generally, when we think about artificial intelligence, we are talking about a series of computational technologies that together mimic human intelligence. And I think this is important because when we think about artificial intelligence, we don't just talk about, oh, the machine, right? And it's doing everything for us. It's really a combination of many things that have accumulated over time to simulate what it appears to be human. So you talk about computer vision that appears to simulate eyes. We're talking about speech recognition that help us to understand computer language better than if we were programming. It's talking about autonomous navigation, something that machines didn't used to do. So it's really the collection of a whole series of technologies that computer scientists over time have been able to assemble to create the power that we see today in current artificial intelligence technologies.
Well, we're going to put up a graphic now, and as we do that, I want to ask you to briefly walk us through the history of AI.
So artificial intelligence has been interesting humanity forever. One could argue it goes all the way back to the Romans, but really modern history of artificial intelligence begins in the 1950s with mainframes, and that was a desire to try to get computers to be more like humans to help us. From the 50s all the way to the 70s, it was a process where we began to develop languages. So remember, we used cards that were put into these machines that were read, but then quickly we moved to vacuum tubes, to transistors, and then languages were created such as Fortran and COBOL. And then after that, we have a little bit of a period of great experimentation, especially with something called decision systems. After that, and now we're going into the 70s, the 80s became kind of what is known as AI winter, because there wasn't a lot of research happening during that period. But after that, we have a tremendous amount of growth in interest in artificial intelligence. So from the 1990s all the way up, you begin to see machines like Deep Blue, who in 1997 beat Gary Kasparov. Then we have the Roomba, which is a robot, computer vision, everything that I talk about, combination of technologies. And that was invented in 2002. And we begin to talk about using artificial intelligence to embed ads into social media to kind of begin to match your interest with that of the marketer. So today we have a tremendous amount of immersion of all of these technologies on all of these different components of technologies that are becoming so pervasive and are enabling capabilities that we couldn't even imagine.
Wow, okay, she's done a great job of bringing us up to present day, Ronnie. So we are there now. Talk about how AI is being used today in the workplace.
So a lot of jobs are moving towards using AI on a daily basis, whether it's to write code, help with administrative tasks, summarize reports, even write reports for people. So it really depends on the position and in some cases the imagination of the person using it and what they choose to do with it.
Cognitive functions. What cognitive functions does AI perform?
It can perform a variety of cognitive functions. So, if we're writing code, right, we need to remember what each line does and what its function is and how do we put it together. So there's memory involved, but there's also problem solving and decision making. So all of them, really.
Wow. What, in your opinion, is AI doing well right now?
It does reasonably well, not great, but okay in summarizing information. It could be really helpful. I've found, for example, that if English is not your first language, correcting grammar and errors, language use errors, it could help you take an article or a paragraph and write it more concisely. Those kinds of routine things AI does well. My friends that are coders tell me it does okay coding, not always, but more times AI is correct than not.
Okay. What about not so well?
The list is actually long. It's prone to errors. Remember, AI basically takes what it sees on the internet. We know the internet is not completely error-free. So if it's using source material that is not correct, it will provide you incorrect information back. A couple of examples, I asked AI to generate my biography. My biography is available online. It's not that hard. Yeah. It got it wrong. It told me I graduated from the University of Tulsa, never been to Tulsa, never set foot at the university. So something very factual that is easily checked, it got wrong. We also know from academic work, ChatGPT makes up references. It creates non-existent references that if you go look for them, just don't exist.
Wow, Martha, what would you say about that accuracy piece, just the reliability accuracy piece?
I think in my case, I will probably put it within context, right? Because depends what you want it for. If you want to use it for brainstorming, if you want to use it for summarizing, if you want to use it as a way of becoming part of that creative process, and Ronnie is very experienced in that area, I think it doesn't matter if it's not correct, right? Because the purpose is not to generate something that is accurate. But if you wanted to begin to make that medical diagnosis, if you wanted to become, civil engineering calculations to put a building, if you want to use it to insert pesticides and water irrigation in an agricultural field, well, you better have that right? Because if you don't get those things correctly, it could have tremendous negative impact. So I think that the question is not so much about the accuracy, but more, what is it that you are used it for? Because depending on the usage, the accuracy and the veracity and how relevant and up to date it is when it becomes more important.
Okay, I want to start to drill down a little bit. We've talked a lot about when you do this or when you do that. Who's you? I mean, it's a loaded question. It seems like just about anybody would qualify. But Ronnie, I'm going to start with you in terms of helping us create a visual. I know we were talking before the program about, Googling something and that AI is the first thing to pop up, right? Whether I'm doing it, you're doing it, whoever. But talk to us about the users of AI.
And again, AI can be used for a lot of different functions. I look at particularly how AI can and cannot be used for creativity, and it depends on the area of creativity. So I do a lot of work on business-related solutions. Accuracy matters, right? If you're developing a new medical device, you better be accurate, right? If you're developing even a creative design for a bridge, you better be accurate or the bridge will collapse. If you're talking about art, maybe not, although what we're finding even with art is that AI is a cliche. It generates really well bad stories, for example, that are very repeat basically similar stories. So there's not a lot of variability. And that's what we're finding with AI. There's not a lot of variability. In general, we're just actually presenting a paper on that it gives very similar answers over and over again. In terms of users, we have students, we have researchers, we have coders. I've used AI to help plan trips.
As you're talking, though, it really does beg the question. It's so available and so accessible that at some point you have to stop and ask yourself the question, is this right? And how do I know if it's right? I mean, do either of you have an answer for our viewers who, again, this is cropping up on a very routine basis. They want to just take it because it's quick, it's easy, right? It's the first thing that crops up and they just want to get on to the next thing. But there is that very, very important question of, is it right?
And it's a critical question. And basically, in my world, what we talk about is keeping the human in the loop. So you don't just let AI do everything. You, as the user, need to check it. You can't just leave it alone. When I planned my trip, for example, I asked it to generate some suggestions of how I could combine similar attractions that were nearby, so I would only go to one location. Well, one of the attractions moved about a year before, but it didn't have that information. Now, I knew that because I was reading up on it, so I could correct it, right? And that helped correct the feedback. But if I wouldn't know that, I would go looking for an attraction at an address that it was no longer there.
Well, I'm just kind of thinking about, we live in a society where technology is so readily available and people are in a big hurry to get on to the next thing. And it's become so easy, like the opening video said. I can just, do it in half the time. So Martha, talk to those people watching who you get the answer and the assumption is, okay, that's right, I'm gonna go on. Talk about the importance of at least having a second or a third source or going to find the source, right? From where you're sitting.
Yeah, so I agree with Ronnie to a certain extent because I think perhaps I have a more optimistic view about the use of this tool because it's so incredibly powerful. I mean, the cognitive capabilities, and I've used this very carefully because it's really not a person, right? It's not a human behind the machine. But the capabilities that these language models have to be able to produce so many different things is staggering. So when we talk about is it right to use this or what can we use it or is it accurate, I think that we need to understand that humans are incredibly adaptable and think about how we used to use maps and we moved the maps all over, and today we don't use maps. We probably don't even know where north is, right? We rely on that. Is that good? I don't know. We kind of decided that wasn't a skill we wanted to keep. I mean, taxi drivers in London had to memorize like the entire city and have an exam. I don't think they do that anymore. So the question that we have to ask ourselves when we think about whether to use these technologies or not is, what are the skills that are valuable that we want to keep? And what are the skills that we really were routine, were unnecessary, that we can have replaced with these machines? I can tell you for a fact that I don't want to be typing notes, right? Who wants to do that? But if I have a machine that can record and type my notes, I will definitely do it. We don't use abacus anymore. We moved to calculators, and now machines are doing tremendously helpful things. My students, for example, if they're doing statistics and they don't understand a formula, they can ask the machine, can you explain it for me? And they will actually go through step by step and explain it. So I think that it is a decision that every one of us has to make as to what are those skills that are really being replaced by a machine that is a good replacement versus something that we want to enhance and we want to keep and therefore check and make sure that it's reliable and accurate, etc.
So my question to the two of you then is, that sounds great, by the way. Who's there doing that? Right? So when you have your students, your student users, or you have just, I mean, anybody really who's out there, they don't have the two of you in the room with them, right? To do that check. So my question is, anywhere from, you know, preschool on up, is there going to be an area where someone is assigned to make sure that students, in this case, are understanding what you just said? Do we have that?
Right now we don't. And the other thing about this is that the capabilities of what these models can do changes almost on a daily basis. So some of the things that these models can't do today, they might be able to do in 6 months. I just we don't know where these developments will take us. So even if we had really concrete advice today, I don't know that it would work 6 months from now. My approach is to say, in the end, if it's your work, you're responsible for it as a student, you need to check it. Basically, you're saving time by using AI for certain things, but now spending your time checking it. So it's not a complete time saver as sometimes students think it is. But it can be helpful. It can provide you with some initial ideas. It can provide you with basic summaries that you can then use in your own work.
So Martha, as she's talking, I'm thinking, okay, it does the burden of proof on the student. I get that. But also it's kind of an evolving role for the teacher / professor as well, because you then need to know what it is that you're looking for to be able to see the red flag and think, oh, it's not quite all. So your work changes too, right?
The work of everybody's changing. It's incredibly dynamic. As Ronnie said, there are multiple capabilities that are being added to this computing processes, machines that we can now use for so many more things. And I guess what I will say, adding to what Ronnie is mentioning, is the fact that we as educators have a responsibility to have these conversations with our students, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not about you shouldn't use it or use it. It's more about this is how you can use it. This is the responsible way of doing it. These are the challenges. These are the drawbacks. So it's more about working with them as to what are the things that you can do with this tool as opposed to prohibit it or sanction it or not allow it, which could be our natural tendencies when we get exposed to new technologies. I think it's about having an honest, open conversation with them and them reflecting back to you as to what are the things that they're doing and then talking about what are the benefits or the drawbacks of having rely on the tool when they're working on assignments or papers for their classes.
That partnership, I love it. This would be a great time, Ronnie, for us to bring in cognitive atrophy. What is that?
So cognitive atrophy, you can think about it as skill decay. So we have a skill and we lose it because we don't use it, right? So whether it's a physical skill or a cognitive skill, if we don't use it on a regular basis, it's just lost. And now when we don't use it, the next time we try to use it, it takes us longer. We have to sort of relearn it, and it's more difficult.
Okay, so this whole program, right? Cognitive atrophy and AI usage. So if I were to say to you, what are the dangers, right, of this AI usage maybe not being done in the correct way, and the effect, what would you tell me?
So there's been several studies showing that when people use AI, for example, for critical thinking, they stop critically thinking themselves, right? They rely on AI to provide them with that critical thinking skill. And then when they need to do it on their own, it's harder. They prefer not to. right? We don't like to do hard things. And they continue to rely on AI. So as they use AI more and more, their ability to think critically about what they're doing decreases. And as Martha mentioned earlier, we need to decide what skills we are willing to give up. I'm a terrible navigator. I was really happy that Google Maps exists, because I would get lost regularly with a map. I'm not willing to remove my ability to critically think, and I think that's one of the things that makes us human. That's one of the things that we could bring to the equation better than AI. So that issue becomes a potential danger of over-reliance.
Yeah. So Martha, talk a little bit more about that, right? So we have a society now exposed to this. It's at every turn. Tempting to go with that and have that be your final answer. Not necessarily the right way to go about it. But what if we project into the future and this were to continue, and maybe there aren't a lot of partnerships being formed to really teach people, right, what you've been talking about today? Where does that get us?
I think, and I don't like this, but I think that we need to recognize that it's going to take every single one of us to realize that if we continue to rely on these technologies time and time again, that long term, those capabilities to think critically, to solve problems, to communicate effectively are going to decay. And as technology evolves, we become the mechanical and the machine becomes the thinking. So unless we purposely make a decision to continue to learn, because the capabilities of these technologies will continue, and we need to decide whether we're going to become the machine that is doing the routine, or are we going to become the intelligent human using the tool to help us do things better. So it is going to take a tremendous amount of effort, because as Ronnie said, we follow the path of least resistance. We will go for the Google AI answer because it's the first one on the list. We will use the tool because it will do the math for us. We will use the machine because it will summarize, and not only summarize it, it will actually write it for us. So I think that it's going to require a lot more on our part, and educators, of course, have a role to recognize that in the long term, we have to be very mindful as to how we want to continue to be that human with the machine to make our lives better and the lives of others better, as opposed to just relying for them.
Okay. Perfect. We have just a couple minutes remaining, and I did want to kind of go home, go into the workplace, go into the schools. Ronnie, if I were to ask you maybe for one piece of advice when it comes to exposure, whether we're at home, whether at work or at school, what one piece of advice could you give to people to move us in the right direction?
And critically think about the answers that you're getting. It's not always right. It's not always accurate. If you come with a mindset of, great, it's helping me, but I also need to trust and verify, I think that gets people to that right place.
Okay, all right. Martha, what about you? What would you say, one thing?
I would say continue to be curious, because it's going to continue to change. We're going to continue to have new capabilities. So if you continue to learn and experiment, you will not be left behind, and you will be able to find new uses for those tools, some of which can be very interesting, entrepreneurial, that will allow you to continue to be the human and the creative capabilities that we have.
Okay, I would be remiss, we have like 2 minutes left. I would be remiss having the two of you sitting here and not asking. Time to pull out your crystal balls, right? What does the future of technology hold for us? And again, about a minute or so. And Ronnie, I'm going to ask the same thing of you. So Martha, start us off. What does it hold?
You know, in the past, we used to say computers are going to liberate us from the toil and of work, and it hasn't happened. Somehow humans manage to continue to make work. So I believe that it's going to create new capabilities, but we humans are going to create so many different jobs, so many new opportunities, that we will continue, in my mind, thrive as a human species.
Well, that's great. Ronnie?
I think, again, following up on Martha, the curiosity piece in learning about AI is critical. You can't use a tool if you don't know anything about it. You're going to injure yourself, right? So I think as people learn more about it, and I hope they do, we're going to see additional developments with AI. And I don't know whether AI will or will not be creative. The interesting thing about creativity is that we go way beyond what is currently existing, and AI is really good about what's currently existing, but not so much. So I don't know if in the future we'll have AI that's creative, but maybe we will.
Okay, talking about cognitive atrophy and AI usage today with Martha and Ronnie. I want to put up a graphic for people wanting more information, and we could have put up a bunch of websites, but I thought for this program what we would do, since we have our UNO experts with us, is put up UNO, the main website there, but the departments that these ladies represent: the Department of Psychology, 402-554-2592, College of Information Science and Technology, 402-554-2380. Ladies, I want to thank you for joining us today and for sharing your time and expertise. This is really giving us lots to think about, so thank you so much. We appreciate that. Our students who are working so hard behind the scenes, and of course, to all of you for watching. As we close, a look at Chalco Hills Recreation Area as seen through the lens of Henry Talaco, a junior here at UNO. We will see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television in the School of Communication. More information and program archives can be found at nebraskapublicmedia.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call the UNO School of Communication at 402-554-2600 during regular business hours, or send an email to consider.this@unomaha.edu.